Okay, so today I am doing my presentation on Daisy Miller by Henry James. The critical article, or like the article I looked at, the article I looked at was by Teddy Duncan Jr. It was Daisy Miller, a study of patriarchal perception. Okay, so Teddy Duncan Jr.'s argument. He was talking a lot about patriarchy, and basically he said he wants to discuss complex narrative structure, transparently divulges pre-established patriarchal notions that affect Winterbourne's perceptions of Daisy, thus executing a social critique. A lot of this is talking about Winterbourne and Daisy, so hopefully to anyone who is listening, I hope you read the book because it kind of spoils it a little bit. But anyways, just getting on to what is patriarchy, just so we're all on the same page. The internet, like Google defines it as a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Another definition I found was patriarchy refers to a society dominated by men. Society, state, and the economy are characterized by systematic, institutionalized, and persuasive gender oppression. In a literal sense, patriarchy means rule by the father. So, he wanted to argue a lot about this. Okay, so getting into it, for some examples. So, for example, Winterbourne's familial, social, and geographical circumstances construct a patriarchal distribution of information. Geneva, where Winterbourne develops his beliefs of male-to-female relations, has its own standards for women's behaviors that include abiding by propriety and submissiveness. So basically, Winterbourne, who is the main character, and like the narrator, who we follow along throughout the story, he is born and raised in Geneva, which is in Europe. There's a photo of Geneva, and he, in like this culture, this European culture, believes women should be very submissive. They listen to the man. They don't really have a strong voice in the community. They just kind of do what they are told. They're very, how would I say, like, Daisy is quite the opposite of these European women. They're very, like, classy. They don't, just, I don't know, like, sleep around, is kind of how it comes across. They just have, like, high standards. So Winterbourne's relatives, such as his aunt, attempt to prohibit interaction with Daisy because of her behaviors, deviates from this template, which is what I was kind of talking about. She's not really like these European girls. She's not very submissive at all. She just kind of does her own thing. And then Winterbourne subjects Daisy to oppression classifications, and his observations of her reflect his, like, own proclivity to establish in quote, formula that applied to Miss Daisy Miller, James 12, and he holds various notions of Daisy from being, like, called an American flirt to a young lady whom a gentleman needs no longer to be at pains to respect. All of these notions, like, and formulas result from a pre-established patriarchal metric that Winterbourne adopts and inherits via the patriarchal distribution of information. So basically, there's not a lot of respect for her because they're like, she's just a flirt, she's just kind of floozy. They're just like, no one really needs to respect her. So some thoughts on the argument. So Winterbourne's study of Daisy is a form of oppression. It assembles a hierarchical construction with Daisy as it subjected, and Winterbourne himself as the subjugator. James displays, the author, James, deploys that this observatory study within this hierarchical structure in order to maintain focus on the internal process of subjugator, which is like the function of Winterbourne as observer is to disclose the subtleties and nuances of inner patriarchal thought. So basically, it's all this is coming from Winterburn's perspective, and it's like he learned all this impression, so all these opinions are coming from his side. So Daisy is just kind of getting the brunt of it. Like, we never see her side of things in this book. Some quotes are like, the male gaze in James's other work, like the author, he has other work that is connected to power and surveillance. The person who gazes is empowered over the person who is the object of the gaze. Meanwhile, James, the author, constructs Daisy to be the object of gaze. And it's like, she's kind of just an object. She's not really a person. This is kind of how they viewed women. They viewed them very low. Anyways, yeah, so, let's see. I kind of wrote a lot here. Yeah, so this, like, text discloses that, like, Daisy and Winterburn similar actions. So they both kind of have this flirtatious energy. There's this idea that the male role permits premarital relations, like gossip and like flirting, while like the female role is not permitted to do the same things that a male's doing. The author says that like shows this symmetry in the text between Daisy and Winterburn as they are reflections of each other. And this is what the article was saying. Winterburn is a charmer in Geneva, and Daisy with her gentleman in Rome. They both have some sort of flirtatious connection to one another, plus like romantic pursuits. And while Daisy is ostracized, Winterburn is unaffected from this. Yet, when Winterburn's position in society is stated in the beginning of the story, he's considered to have no enemies, an extremely amiable fellow, and universally liked, when Daisy is constantly being challenged and judged. So, in conclusion, without ever attempting to understand, we never get Daisy's perspective in Daisy Miller. So we only hear Winterburn's perspective. The author refuses to portray Daisy's intentions, instead relying on Winterburn's to dispatch, like, the speculations of her movements. He's very judgmental. We just get this middleman narrative between the events and the plot and the depiction of these events, and we learn much more about Winterburn and the patriarchy than we ever do about Daisy. So we are getting, it's very patriarchal because it is all coming from a man, and from these high standards we never really get Daisy's input. I have some citations, but anyways, just kind of wrapping things up, I was a little bit bummed that I had to do this presentation before we gotta discuss the end of like this book in class, just because all we talked about was Geneva and like the European society expectations. We didn't really get to talk about the patriarchy and like these flirtations throughout the book, and like her death with her illness and stuff. So yeah, perfect. Let me see if I can figure out how to stop this.